Alright guys, I just want to make this quick video to tell you about these great little tomatoes that I have growing. Now, I'm into my veg. Anyone who sort of friends with me, follows me and that over the years will know, you know, I'm dead into my growing veg. But I thought this year, you know, I'm going to make a good go of it. Now, I bought like 7 tomato plants from the nurseries. Obviously, you have to pay money for it. They're not cheap, but you know, for what you get out of them. And you know, I was able to get like 7 different varieties, and so I had them ready to go. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna, you know, try some lettuce as well. And so anyway, I scooped up some earth because I didn't have any compost at the time. So I scooped up some earth, yeah, and sort of sieved it into these seed pods, and then I put some into a tub for my mum, because she wanted to grow out. She goes, oh, I'll try growing lettuce as well. And we literally sprinkled these lettuce seeds in the pot, and that was it. They were lettuce seeds, absolutely. You know what lettuce are like. They're tiny little things. Tomatoes are obviously more rounded, and I don't even have tomato seeds at all. This is the amazing thing, yeah. And so as it happened, you know, I was waiting for these lettuce, and lettuce usually come up like a little two green leaf, and they can split into 3 leaf, and then they grow into obviously lettuce plants. You know, you can tell what they are pretty easily. And out of my seed pods anyway, I started getting these little green furry things, like 2 leaf, but they were furry stemmed, and I thought, wow, that kind of looks like a weed that we have in our garden, because we have this weed, so it's like a green leaf, and it's like a cross leaf like that, and it's really dark green, and it's got like furry stems. I thought, oh, that must be one of the weeds. So I cut these furry things out of my seed pods, and then they start growing in my mum's pot. And she's like, oh, let them grow, see what they are. And I was like, well, they're not lettuce, so I don't know why you're bothering. Anyway, they keep growing, and as they're growing, and I mean, the other 7 tomatoes are coming on a bit now. They're getting ready to sort of plant outside, because I bought them early. I put them in the porch ready, and you know, these green things keep growing. And then as I start looking, and they start splitting, and you see the actual true leaves coming through, because the bottom leaves on a tomato plant are actually like 2 leaf like that. Anyway, I call them the false leaves, I do, yeah. And so the plant starts growing, and as it starts growing, I'm like, that really looks like a tomato plant. And then basically, cut a long story short, these start growing into tomato plants. And you know, I tried to sort of physically explain it. I mean, I did used to put food waste out in the ground, but point number 1 being, I used to bury it deep underground. You know, the dirt that I had here, I scooped it off the top. Second point being is that when I use tomatoes to eat, like in my salads, I'll put all of it in, seeds and all. I know some people, I don't know why, but they'll take the seeds out of the tomatoes and then just use like the flesh and the skin, and I never do that. Like say, if they're in a salad, chop, throw it in. If it's on a butty, I mean, sometimes I might dry the tomatoes off a bit, but I never remove the seeds. Hardly ever will I have tomato. And my mother, she likes a tomato butty as well, or a tomato on toast or something, and she never removes the tomato either, the seeds either. So physically trying to explain how these seeds made it onto the soil, the, you know, 1 spade of soil that is scooped up. It's just, you know, trying to physically explain it. And out of that 1 pot, I think I got about nearly 50, I think it was 10 to 15 tomatoes out of that pot. What I did was, yeah, I mean, I transplanted a load, and I had 8. But one of them was a offshoot off a different plant, but I had like 7. 7 tomato plants, and I didn't plant any of these tomatoes. I didn't plant any seeds. I mean, literally. And where I took the earth from, it wasn't a tomato patch. There hasn't been any tomatoes growing there, and so it's just weird. And then all these tomatoes are growing out of it, so I took like 7 out. I put them in bigger pots so they could come on a bit, and then there were like a few more left, and I repotted them. I think, like I say, I think I got about 10 or 15 just out of that one pot, and they haven't stopped growing. Like now, that pot's gone because, I mean, I literally, when I took all the tomato plants out, the earth come out with them, and then I turned the earth a little bit, and so you know, I don't believe, I haven't really checked actually. I put it to one side, so maybe I'll go and check and see if there's anything in it, but I don't think there is. And so yeah, I must have got about 10, 15 tomatoes. Because I had a batch of 7, and then I had another batch of 8. So yeah, like 15. And I mean, now I've planted them in the garden. You'll see you have the 7 at the bottom, which had an early start. And then you've got these other, like I said, about 15 tomato plants, which I didn't even plant. Do you know what I mean? And as well, like in hindsight, you know, if I knew this was going to happen, then I wouldn't have even bothered buying them 7 tomatoes from the nurseries. Like, but to be honest, I mean, these tomatoes, like about 12 of them, whatever, are already in the ground, and they're finding their feet, so to speak. It takes them a while, but I actually think that these tomatoes are actually going to grow up to be like, I was going to say cleaner, but that may not make sense in the agricultural world. But I think they're going to grow up as in like no problem. I mean, these 7 tomatoes that I got from the nurseries, right? I mean, concerning offshoots, they've had shoots coming up from the bottom, from the bottom stalks. They've had like suckers out of control, double stemmed. The big tomatoes didn't do very well. Doesn't look like the bell tomatoes are going to do very well either. So, but these, you know, 13, 15 tomatoes, whatever they are, that have grown out of nothing, that I didn't plant, I actually believe that they're going to grow into the best looking, you know, the best structural sort of tomatoes that's going to be there, to be honest. So, but I mean, we're in July now, so we have like, we've got all of July, we've got all of August, all of September even, you know, so it'll be really good to, you know, see the end product. Like, so with plenty of water, which we're having right now, we're getting a bit of rain, so see how they get on. Which is amazing, because if I did plant seed, I probably wouldn't even get the same thing. And I don't know where these come from. They haven't grown on the land, apart from there's a lettuce that's grown by itself, which is nice. It's like, you know, I planted about 15-20 seeds of lettuce to try and get some, and they didn't even come up. And yet, like, one lettuce plant has sort of come up by itself, which is pretty cool. I mean, I can chop off a bit of lettuce. So basically, it's going to be like a forest of tomato plants. So, but this whole thing, you know, and when that's what I mean. They keep coming. I've got like about 2 now growing. I've got another 2 which I haven't even planted outside. I've got another 2 growing out the seed pods again. I'm like, where? I mean, I planted a couple of apple seeds in these seed pods, but then I've got like the more tomatoes are growing still. They're still growing out of the seed pods now, which, like I said, I cut most of them off. I mean, there was literally like 2 in one seed pod. And then there was like at least 1 out of each seed pod. I mean, I must have cut about 10 away out of the seed pods. And now they're still coming on. It's just like a, like I say, it's amazing, because when you try and grow things, they don't even grow. And these tomatoes, which I didn't plant, it's like a seed I didn't even plant. They just keep growing and growing and growing. And I'm one to think, just go with nature, go with God. You know, if God wants to give me tomatoes, he gives me tomatoes. So I'm like, okay, then it's tomatoes this year, is it? And I don't know what I'm going to do with them. Maybe I'll freeze them, or sort of try and puree them a little bit or something, and store them away. But yeah, it's just going to be like a forest. So and like I said, they keep coming on. I've got apples there, but then there's like little tomatoes keep coming on with it. But you know, sort of a biblical thing, it reminded me of well, it was like the Elijah time, because obviously the spirit of Elijah, and like the 2 witnesses that are coming, have the spirit of Elijah and Moses. And one of the miracles of the Spirit of God that was given to Elijah, one of the miracles of the candlestick that was given to Elijah, these are the 2 candlesticks, the 2 spirits of God out of the 7 spirits of God. One of them candlesticks, one of his powers, if you like, that God gave to Elijah, if you want to put it in, you know, a literal sense, one of the powers that God gave to Elijah, obviously he was able to do everything, like bring fire down to consume his enemies, stop the rain. But one of his other, raise the dead, heal the sick. One of his other powers, though, was to replenish, just move it over a little bit, replenish food. Because the woman says, you know, I only have a little bit of oil for, like, you know, 1 meal. So he says, use it anyway. Make me a cake. And so she made him a cake. But what she seen was when the oil had replenished itself. She used the oil to make a cake for Elijah, but then the oil replenished itself. And it goes back, and then you think about Jesus Christ then, and then you think about, you know, the feeding the thousands, and the bread and the fish replenished. And it makes me, you know, similarities to this thing, because, you know, they just keep coming and coming and coming and coming, and I literally haven't done anything to bring them on. In fact, you know, the only thing I've done, like, to try and stop it even, was like turn the soil, you know what I mean, in that pot. But like I said, they're still coming out of the seed pods, and I haven't got even anywhere to put them. You know, I'm going to struggle to find it. But it reminded me of that, because, like, keep the fish and the bread keep coming and coming and coming, and the oil got replenished. And so yeah, it made me think about that, you know, feeding the thousands with the fish and the bread, and the replenishing of the oil and all that. But it's like seed, you know, that I didn't create, like. And it kind of, you can kind of go to, like, on a human level as well, because, like, God can create anything out of anything. Like the scripture, it says, remember that scripture where it says, John the Baptist said that, you know, out of these stones God can raise up children for Abraham. Now that's a funny thing, because Abraham was 2,000 years before. So John the Baptist has said God can raise up children for Abraham. In other words, like his direct seed, like this is his 3rd son or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So what John the Baptist was saying, out of the earth, like obviously Adam was created from the dust of the earth, the first man, that God could raise up children for Abraham, who was 2,000 years early. So what it's saying is, basically, John the Baptist saying, like, I can take the DNA, God can take the DNA of Abraham, and out of the dust of the earth he could make up one of his children as if he was like a direct son of Abraham. I was thinking, wow. And do you know what I mean? That has always given me some sort of faith. I mean, because like, I mean, last year I was with this girl. Well, not with her, like, but we were sort of like, you know, falling in love with each other and that. And it was amazing because we had so much faith, because, you know, she had like a sort of contraception operation, if you like. So basically she had a tubes tied. So I mean, if we were to get together and get married, she was like, well, you know, I may not be able to have kids easy. You know, I'm like, well, you know, if we did have a kid, then it'd be a miracle from God. And do you know what? My faith is so strong that I believe that God could even, like John the Baptist says, I believe that God could even raise up children for me without even human touch, human physical touch. You get me? Because if you think about it now, Virgin Mary, obviously no physical intercourse was made to make a baby how you think it would be made. Of course, Jesus Christ was born. But then on another level, right, then you've got like Elizabeth, wife of Zechariah, who gave birth to John the Baptist. He said she was well over age, she was like over age, and she'd been barren. So all her life she hadn't been able to have kids physically. And then, like, I believe what he meant was she's gone into the menopause, which means, you know, obviously stops getting rid of eggs. She's stricken of age, she's on the menopause, and she's barren. We haven't had kids all her life, but the angel says, you know, you will give birth to a son, John the Baptist. And Zechariah sort of didn't believe the angel, and then the angel says, well, now you're not going to be able to speak then until that baby's born and proved wrong, basically, yeah? So you've got to have that faith. But here's the thing, here's my point being, no physical thing was changed. It was all spiritual. Do you know what I mean? Another example is that the angels came to Abraham and they said, Sarah's going to bear a son. And they were like, no, can't, because she's barren. She's well over, what was she, 90 something when they had children, and they died at 120 something, I believe it was, around that sort of ballpark figure. So it's not like they were, you know, 90 something, but they lived until 500. It was like, you know, they were kind of, well, I mean, 120, I mean, you know, that's, so around 90 or so, that's when she bore the child. She thought she was too old. She'd probably gone well into the menopause, and she'd been barren her whole life. They'd been trying the whole life, and nothing, physically trying the whole life, and nothing had happened. But bang, when God says spiritual change happens, but bang, spiritual. Everything was spiritual, and she gives birth, boom. And Mary gives birth to Jesus Christ. It was all spiritual. And do you know what? With this thing, I'm like, where were the seeds? I sift through the dirt. I sift the dirt out. I do it with my hands. I didn't come across any sort of seeds popping out at me. Or I know they're small, but I mean, tomato seeds aren't that small. I would have noticed 20 odd, 25 seeds maybe passing through the soil, but it just seemed more like a spiritual thing. Like, here you go, it's tomatoes this year, and they were all growing, like, do you know what I mean? And I was like, you know, blessed, obviously. Not because, you know, I couldn't afford to buy tomatoes or anything like that, you know, it's nothing like that. But, you know, blessed to have all these tomatoes growing, and it felt like a real sort of spiritual thing. And it took me back to thinking about, the miracles of the Bible in the past. And it took me back to thinking about my own faith, like last year, where, like I said, when I was with that girl. Like I said, we didn't even meet because she lives across the pond anyway in America. We've never met, but we haven't spoke for 9 months anyway. since the Feast of Tabernacles, we haven't spoke anyway. But yeah, but back then we had the faith so much that it would take a miracle from God anyway for her to get pregnant, because, like I said, her tubes were tied. So it was going to be harder to have kids. And, you know, maybe she sort of thought, you know, I can never give him kids, because, yeah, obviously I I'd like, you know, a kid, a son or a daughter or whatever before the end of the age comes, because afterwards mortality is going to be over. You know, my guess is approximately 6.5 years from now. We'll know more when it happens, like, but mortality is going to be over. So when the 1,000 year come, people are not going to be marrying, giving in marriage, or reproducing. They're not going to be able to, because we're all going to be like heavenly bodies. We're going to be living for 1,000 years on this earth with Christ, who has risen from the dead himself. But no one's going to be marrying, giving in marriage, or reproducing. So yeah, I would like a child, son, daughter, whatever. Prefer a son. But you know, to be the dad that I don't think I've ever had, really, to be honest. But yeah, but I think maybe she had that sort of doubt in her mind, well, it'd be hard for me to give him kids. But I always had in the faith, well, hey, I love you, you love me, sort of, if we're together, you know, and if it's all right, you know, and God will make it happen easily. Do you know what I mean? In fact, at one point she was having these like I suppose you could call them now phantom pregnancy symptoms, you know, like morning sickness, you know, tender boobs, whatever you want to call it. And so she, you know, even she thought, oh, you know, I feel like I'm pregnant or something. And I was like, well, I'm just going to take a test anyway, you know, it's only a test. But she wasn't. So, but you know, I had that faith anyway, that out of nothingness. I mean, if you go back to the John the Baptist thing about him saying he can take the DNA from someone else, which is, sorry, Abraham, 2,000 years later, and bring to the dust of the earth and bring him up a son as if he was his like actual natural son, then imagine how easy it would be let's say for him to take the DNA of me and spiritually create a child, basically, from someone else who's still alive. It'd be easy. It's like woman was created from man, you know, the rib of Adam, and he created Eve. That's why he call it woman. And so how much easier would it be for God to take my DNA and create another seed spiritually, because everything was spiritual about, you know, Elizabeth and Mary and Sarah, and there was another one, I can't remember her name. All the main important people of the Bible, of humanity, of the Hebrew nation even, all of them were, all the important people were miracle births. Jesus Christ, obviously the main one. Then you go far back. Abraham, Sarah, she was barren and then 90 odd, and then she had Isaac. And then obviously the bloodline of the Hebrews came down through there. So you had Isaac, and then even Isaac's wife, I think it was Rebecca, she was barren as well for many number of years until she gave birth to Jacob. And so yeah, even she was a long time waiting to give birth. And then who else did we have? Yeah, John the Baptist as well. He was born to Elizabeth, and she was barren for all her life. And like I said, then it says she was stricken in years. In other words, she's too old to have kids now, God. She's into a menopause or whatever. So all the main important people, well, not all of them, but mostly the important people of the Bible were actually miracle births. So it's quite incredible, isn't it? All them people who had miracle births were all spiritual. Nothing physical changed. And that's the tomato thing. It felt like a spiritual thing. I know it was a physical, but it really felt like a spiritual thing is going on with them. So yeah, but I totally believe that, you know, if God wanted to raise me up a son, then he could do it. He could do it spiritually rather than physically. So anyway, so that's the story about the tomatoes anyway. And you know, it kind of feels like it means more to me than just hey, brought up these plants. I suppose humans are like plants. From seed I didn't even plant, create seed I didn't even buy, plant, water or nothing, and yet God raised up these, not children, but God raised up these tomato plants from the dust of the earth. So yeah, I've been Pastor Prophet Justin Roberts from End of the Age Bible Prophecy. God bless you all. Amen.